Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Ahmed. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace. Hey folks, Ahmed and Carrie here with you for another episode of Consulting Mastery. Want to get into a topic today that, I guess we could call resilience, maybe perseverance. I'm not sure what label to put on it yet, but want to get into a discussion on, a quality that we have seen, and we've, at this point, mentored, coached, and trained, somewhere around 1,000 B2B consultants and firms. We're pushing that number pretty quickly. And we just found that there's something it's very subtle that maybe separates the ones who get tremendous results and build fantastic organizations from the rest. And we want to try to, double click on what that is here today, coming up in a second. If you want to be one of those consultants who gets tremendous results for your company, organization, firm, head over to 90daypipeline.com/talk. That's 90daypipeline.com/talk. And let's find out if we can help you. Carrie, this came out of a recent conversation I had with one of our old clients who you might recall, Kristen Mashburn, who is going to be featured on the podcast in one of our interviews. And I don't know, it may not be live by the time folks hear this. So it's coming down the pipe if you haven't heard the interview yet. And I was interviewing Kristen as I'm conducting a few interviews now with some of our, more prolific clients on, what did it really take to build the business? And Kristen runs a fantastic, successful, growing consulting business with a team of 2, 3, 4 people. Very in demand, gets great results for her clients. And, 4 years ago, when she came through our program, it was a very different story. She was just getting started. She didn't have a lot to show for it in terms of revenue, clients, results. She was trying to find her place in the marketplace, and she was struggling. And she made this comment to me at the end of the interview, where she called out the struggle of the early days. And she said to me, I remember coming on a call with you, and I was probably a little bit rude to you because I was frustrated and I was struggling and nothing was working, or it wasn't working the way I wanted it to work, which I don't recall her being rude. I can't imagine. Once you hear the interview, you'll know what I mean. I can't imagine Kristen being rude. She was fine, but she was frustrated, and I've seen that before. And she said, your advice to me was, you're doing the right things, keep going, results are inevitable. And so she did that, and indeed results showed up, and first in drips and drabs, and then more consistently. And there's a whole conversation here about consistency that we'll get into. But the point is, she didn't get deterred by a lack of results out the gate. She knew she was doing the right things. She kept executing on the system, and results showed up. And I just wish more people had the resilience, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe you'll have a better word than I do. I wish more people had the resilience to keep going when they know they're doing the right things.
Can I call it stick-to-itiveness?
Stick-to-itiveness. That's very academic and scientific, but
there you go. Yeah, it's really, really interesting to watch how quickly somebody who has oriented their entire business life around a particular idea, a particular path, how quickly some of them will just abandon ship. And we can talk about all the whys and, reasons that happens, but we as humans, set ourselves up sometimes by creating these timelines that, quite frankly, come from nowhere, right? That by X, this needs to happen, or by Y, this is going to happen. And we're, it's a funny word to use when we're talking about not accomplishing something and feeling kind of down about it, but we're arrogant enough to presume that this crystal ball that we purport to have is accurate, right? And then when things don't run as planned, we kind of scuttle away and crawl under our desk. And I find it really, really interesting And I think what you said that rings the most true to me is to persevere when you know you're doing the right thing. And that is worth digging into, because to me, that's the piece that gets people tripped up, right? It's one thing to persevere because you know you're doing the right thing. We've all watched every movie that's ever been made, right? About someone who's banging into adversity and finds their way through because they have the, the right mission, and they're doing all the things to get there. The challenge often comes in not knowing that you're doing the right thing. In this case, Kristen was lucky because she was able to borrow that belief from you. She had seen the success that, our business has had. She had seen success that other folks who have gone down that path had, and she could intellectually parse out the fact that it wasn't that the thing didn't work, that the thing was wrong. It's just that the timeline maybe was different, or that she had to do a little bit of iteration, and I'm sure we'll get to that as well. But yeah, I think the question I would ask is, how do you know that you're doing the right thing? What is the right thing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Now, for starters, you never know for sure. And this notion of, I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, on the one hand, I hate that that concept, because if you'll only believe it when you see it, you're probably never going to see it. You have to have some degree of conviction and belief that what you're doing is going to work for it to work. Otherwise, you're just not going to put in the effort or execute effectively. At the same time, there's no substitute for results. So we know that the client's belief is going to be the strongest when they get their first major result. Whether that's a discovery call from a cold prospect, or a major offer proposal, or a closed deal, right? When one or all of those things happen for the first time, that's when their belief is really through the roof and tangible. And even if they may have been a good believer in the process and in themselves along the way, it spikes when the result shows up and it's tangible. Okay. Now, with that said, you have to have a reasonable conviction in what you're doing for what you're doing to work. And I think a good question to ask yourself in that regard is, have other people gotten results doing what I'm doing? And yeah, in fairness, if you're doing something super untested and unproven, and there's not a lot of examples or proof that other people have gotten results doing the thing that you're doing, you probably should have some self-doubt. You probably should be worried. You probably should question whether you're going down the right path. And frankly, unless you're trying to innovate on a new way to do things, you shouldn't be the first one. And to use the obvious context of what we're talking about is marketing for consultants. Unless you're me trying to pave the way and create new marketing channels and methods for consultants because I'm a marketing expert, you probably shouldn't be the first one to do anything. You should probably just follow a proven, tried and tested path where there's overwhelming evidence that people have done this before and have done well. And if that's the case, then, the doubt should lie more in yourself. I mean that in a positive way, and we can unpack that, than in the process.
Yes. And when you talk about the self, I think it's also important to call out some nuance here, which is what we're not saying is keep doing the exact same thing the exact same way every single day until the end of time, right? I'm sure that Kristen didn't just do it exactly the same way and, repeat that behavior over and over and over and over again. What she did was stayed the course, knowing that, more broadly, the system, the process, the tactics work. And also recognizing that she, as all of the consultants that we work with, and I'm sure everyone that are listening to us today, are smart people who solve problems. And so working within a system, continuing to do the right thing, but also recognizing the little adjustments and, tweaks that need to be made as you learn more. That is critical. It is crazy making to do the exact same thing that's not working for days and months and weeks, years on end. But doing the, capital R right thing, putting yourself on that course, and then just making the small adjustments until you fine tune things to where they need to be, that's the real win. That's the thing that's going to get you where you need to go. And in the long term, that's also what's going to allow this whole thing to be sustainable, because things around you are going to continue to change, right? You're going to continue to change, and recognizing the adjustments to be made within the larger effective system. That's what allows you to, be nimble enough, but not waste your time changing tactics over and over again.
Yeah, and frankly, I think being able to measure your progress using lead indicators,
yes,
is critical, because I am not suggesting that you do something, execute on a tactic with zero signs of progress, hoping that one day it's just going to work. No, you've got to be able to measure and assess, is this working at some level? And can I further optimize to make it work at the level that I want it to work? So, practically, to use our example, we were talking to Kristen about positioning and messaging and leveraging LinkedIn to establish relationships with cold connections and turn them into deals and so on and so forth. Well, if we're not getting any engagement, if no one wants to talk to you, if nobody's engaging with your material, if nobody's, expressing any kind of interest, and I don't mean if you post a single LinkedIn post, because we've gotten that before, right? I put up a post on LinkedIn, where are the clients, right? Why are they paying me yet, right? After a reasonable period of effort and iteration, there's no traction. Well, that's reason to be concerned. And, if you're working with an organization like ours, you should probably raise the flag and ask the question, why isn't this working? But if there is evidence of progress, and there are some wins, and they might not be at the level or the frequency or the magnitude that you want ultimately, but there is reason to believe that the engine is working. And to use a relatable example, right? Like, you're going to the gym, you're trying to lose weight, and maybe the scale hasn't tilted yet, but you feel better, right? Like, you have a little more energy than you usually do. You're in a better mood. You have less mental fog. Well, those are all signs you're doing the right things, and the scale will ultimately tip. So yeah, I agree with you. There is the other extreme here, which is, frankly, less common. So I hesitate to warn people against it. But the other extreme would be to be just, pig-headedly committed to a particular path or tactic or strategy, and not be aware enough to be able to read the writing on the wall when it's not working. Less common, but also dangerous.
Well, and both are just kind of unrealistic, fantastical thinking. And so what's really critical, regardless of which end of that scale you may tip towards, and to your point, yes, most people lean more into that, I'm just going to give up, walk away, stop doing the thing, is you've got to objectively be able to see what's happening. And the great news is that when you're talking about marketing, when you're talking about sales, like anything along the business development path, is all very measurable. And if you're measuring it well, it's really easy to see where the gaps are, right? You can see what's effective, and you can see exactly where along that path things fall apart. And so ensuring that you have some kind of system to pay attention to that, and that you're not, to your point, just looking at the ultimate goal and deciding that, I did get there, I didn't get there, therefore I am or I'm not successful. That's what's going to help you figure this out. And more importantly than figuring it out, not get into some kind of emotional spin that has you making terrible decisions.
Yeah, and I feel like it's really worth highlighting, and maybe we bring it home on this, the appeal of abandoning.
Yes.
the process. There is, I don't think I'm overstating it when I say your brain wants you to quit. Like there is a very strong pull to throwing in the towel, and it's driven by a few things. I mean, number one, getting anything to work past the strategic stage when you get into the tactical execution is hard. It requires good, effective, thoughtful execution consistently over time. And you could call that mundane, but I'm going to call it hard work. And you just got to be able to see it through until you get your first taste of real results, in which case you'll be plenty motivated to keep doing it. But until that first result, until that first win, it is hard work. And it's easier on your psyche and your ego to instead find another shiny object to pursue and then blame the strategy, right? Blame the tactic. And so what this often sounds like is, well, LinkedIn doesn't work, so I'm going to go and hire somebody to do some cold calls for me. Or, advertising doesn't work, so I'm going to go and do this other thing. And so what happens is, and we see this all the time, you get people who have basically gone through shiny object after shiny object after shiny object because they've concluded that, well, this doesn't work and that doesn't work and that doesn't work and the challenge is you never really run out of shiny objects because there's always another marketer, right, trying to pitch you and sell you on a new way of doing things. And frankly, half of the industry is built on these kinds of promises that prey on people's inability to stay the path and stay the course on what they're doing, and are just susceptible to, doing the next shiny object thing because that's frankly easier than doing the hard work of staying on the course that they're on.